African government authorities and business leaders are calling on continent's leaders to make concerted efforts to use funds from fossil fuels to finance a transition to use sources with lower carbon emissions. This emerged as the Africa Energy Week conference concluded its three-day gathering at the Cape Town Waterfront. Today, the conference discussed the use of hydro energy generation to consolidate its existing resources. African leaders concluded that the conference was meant to create an enabling environment for African businesses to trade. Well, today, the leaders discussed the ways to exploit the continent's hydroelectricity energy. And this comes in the midst of two big incomplete projects aimed at developing hydroelectric power in the continent, such as the Inga Dam in Congo and Ethiopia's Great Renaissance Dam project. Now, the leaders have called on global partners to direct its investments towards the realization of these projects. The conference also discussed the development of infrastructure to move gas between Mozambique, Zimbabwe and South Africa. The leaders reiterated the continent's needs to sustain an integrated energy mix to boost the continent's economic growth. Now, to take us through the outcomes of the Africa Energy Week conference, we're now joined via Zoom by Verner Ayukegba, who's a Senior Vice President, African Energy Chamber. He leads the organization's international outreach and public policy initiatives. Thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
What would you say, by and large, has been the major outcomes of Africa Energy Week this week?
I would say there are a number of them. The first one would be that Africans are looking at energy transition, the way it is addressed by the world, to be Africa-centric. And what that really means is that people in Africa, investors, stakeholders in government, are looking at energy transition, energy investments, taking into considerations the realities of their economies. And in the case of South Africa, for example, where 75% of South African power is generated by coal, what that actually means is that as South Africa seeks to move away from coal consumption for its electricity, other options like gas need to be pushed significantly. And we cannot close out gas because we want to move into other energy forms like solar. Everything is welcome as long as it enables us to allow transition to work in a manner that provides affordable and reliable energy to South Africans and to Africans overall. I think that is key, that one cannot transition in Limpopo, one cannot transition in Johannesburg in the same way that you transition in New York or in Sweden.
What else came through before I start really sort of unpacking some of the things that came through?
Oh, just first off, South Africa is open for business. I think that is key. Cape Town is open for business. Beautiful weather, beautiful people, the ability to be able to host a major event, a whole host, more than 1,000 people coming from outside into Cape Town in a post-COVID environment, safe and really important for the economies of Africa across the region. I think that is important in terms of what came through. Apart from, of course, significant number of agreements and deals that were signed amongst investors, amongst companies with respect to increasing investment in the energy sector in Africa.
You talked about transition. There were quite a few activists that were protesting outside Africa Energy Week, and I'm just wondering, what's your message to them? What is it that perhaps they're not understanding in terms of the work that national oil companies, governments and companies are trying to do? They seem to be concerned that energy is not being, the transition is not happening quick enough, and that there isn't enough commitment from some of our leaders?
Our message to them is simple. Their concerns are welcome. They are welcome to the dialogue. However, they need to listen to others. They need to listen to the chamber, which also seeks to advocate for those people in Northwestern Province, those people in Kenya, in Uganda, who do not have access to power. More than 600 million Africans have no access to power. In terms of access to clean cooking fuels, it's even 900 million. And a lot of those are people in the hinterlands. A lot of those people are women. Those people also need to be able to have a voice. And if you ask somebody in the deep provinces of Nigeria, if at all they cared whether their power was coming from gas or it was coming from solar, I bet you those children in schools in Nigeria would tell you that they wanted power to be able to power their schools, their labs, and it would be secondary if at all that was coming from gas or from solar. I know no African who hates his environment and advocates for his environment to be destroyed. But if at all the US is using gas, Germany is increasing its consumption of Russian gas, then I do not see how we can morally or even economically argue that fossil fuels, in terms of particularly gas, should be closed out of the equation when you're looking at generating power for Africans. I think we have been blessed with God-given resources, which we need to be able to use for the benefit of the people.
Does that then speak to the conference theme, which is making energy poverty history by 2030?
Absolutely. I think it is extremely important to focus on that. And if not, we lose people. Energy, access to energy, it's all about people. People are seeking improvement for their lives and that of the children. And it is unacceptable for us to accept a paradigm where Africa, which emits just 2% of global emissions, is asked to transition in the same manner as those who emit a significantly high amount of greenhouse gases. We are not saying that we are against transition. We are saying that transition needs to happen in a manner that is not destructive to the economies of Africans, and is in a manner that accepts the realities in which they find ourselves. There is no way we are going to attain millennium-driven goals if we seek to solely listen to those who were protesting and others, by the way, across the globe, who speak as if they love this continent more than us. We do believe that people need to be given access to reliable and affordable energy for us to be able to fight against poverty.
How much progress are we making in terms of owning those resources that you talk about? Because quite often the story of Africa is that we have all of these blessings, but it's the foreign companies that come in and exploit them, and we get the scraps from it. Is that story changing?
I certainly agree with you that in a number of African countries, we have not, at least the industry has done a very poor job at showing, number one, what they do, number two, giving local communities and also some of the governments the ownership that they need to have in terms of actually benefiting in a particular manner from those resources. But also, it is extremely important to improve governance. If you don't improve governance, then you are certainly going to have a situation where resources are not used in the manner in which they need to be used. So yes, absolutely, we encourage transparency and we encourage a greater stakeholdership by governments and local communities in these resources. It is a problem, and it is a problem that has to be solved. But it is not going to be solved by wanting to kill the industry entirely. Rather, it is going to be solved by taking a bigger look at the governance issues that are part of the industry, and they be tackled head on.
How much cooperation is there between African national oil companies, African governments in the development of Africa's energy?
There is cooperation, but I can tell you it's not enough. There needs to be more cooperation. We have over 53 African countries at the moment, and it would be impossible for you to get developments of a larger scale in some of these countries because they're too small. What we need is a push towards inter-country infrastructure. We need regional style infrastructure. We need to see more in places like Southern Africa, where Mozambique has a significant amount of gas, and South Africa has a significant market for gas. Yes, there is a pipeline that has been built. Yes, there is a pipeline that supplies South Africa for gas. With gas, we need more. Mozambique is going to be one of the largest global producers of gas in the next decade. They're probably going to be third globally. South Africa needs gas. And so it is a no-brainer in that sense for us to see more inter-country infrastructure to be able to meet that demand. It's not just South Africa, it's all the neighboring countries around, including Zimbabwe, including Malawi, and a whole host of others. And so, absolutely, I agree with you that countries need to work together, national oil companies need to work together to be able to make sure that the resources are properly monetized and that the demand for energy is satisfied.
And there are a number of challenges, and I wonder sometimes if we aren't getting in our own way. If we think about projects like Inga that are struggling to complete, and then the fighting over the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam, how do we get out of our own way sometimes in advancing?
We do that by talking to each other, acknowledging our differences not as problems, but as differences which can be used to complement what it is that each other is doing. We have the Congo. We need to be able to see the region come together to be able to invest and push these projects through. If at all the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia is seen like a single Ethiopian project, then of course it is going to cause animosity with countries like Egypt. What we need to see is that all of these countries come together and acknowledge that some of the problems which we face are joint problems and they don't end at the borders of our countries. That is the only way. We need to all have a stake in this to be able to push these projects ahead. These projects go beyond an individual government. They go beyond an individual political direction. We need to see them as regional projects, African projects in certain ones, which benefit peoples across national borders.
Sadly, when it comes to energy on the continent and, dare I say, other parts of the world, because of the nature of the business, the size of the sector, corruption often becomes one of the biggest cancers. Is this something that's being addressed at a summit such as Africa Energy Week? Because if we don't deal with that, a lot of these gains come to naught.
First of all, let's say corruption is a big issue. It's a big issue that transcends sectors. So it's not just in the energy sector. And I agree with you that corruption is a big problem that has to be addressed. It has to be addressed seriously, and it also has to be addressed beyond borders. Yes, For us at the African Energy Chamber, we truly and strongly believe that transparency is one of those things that is going to help create an enabling environment. And that is the reason why we have put governance at the center of what we are doing. If you look at the event, we had significant amounts of panels where we were talking about governance, regulation, the regulatory environment, how you improve governance, how you demand transparency from a lot of the companies that are now coming in to the value chain, into the battery minerals value chain. That is something which is huge, and that is a problem that is likely to accentuate if at all we don't demand and increase transparency in that particular sector. The oil and gas industry had a huge transparency problem. That has increased significantly, one must admit, but we need more. And as we seek for regional projects, we should also continue to demand strongly for regional approach against things like corruption, to be able to tackle those companies that also can use their regional presence as an advantage to be able to fight against one particular country. And so, yes, corruption is an issue, but what I can tell you is that we at the Chamber, Africa Energy Week, has been looking particularly at this, and it is something which we are certainly going to continue to look at and to continue to put pressure to make sure that we have increased transparency, to make sure that a lot of communities where these resources come from feel like they are part of the story around reducing energy poverty, and to make sure that they benefit themselves from the resources which they bring to the fore, which their communities provide. Thank you.
All right. I want us to end on a positive note. So if you could perhaps just take us through some of the deals maybe that have been signed, the nature of those deals, and also what we can look forward to in the energy sector in the coming months and years.
Well, there are a number of things. First of all, I would not end with saying we had the launch of an African Green Dialogue Initiative, which brought together a whole number of countries, including the African Energy Chamber. So we had Equatorial Guinea, we had Republic of Congo, and we had Senegal, we had Germany, which came together to launch a Green Dialogue Initiative, which is going to look significantly at pushing green technologies that are certainly going to be able to help African economies to increase their access to green energy without necessarily losing their competitive edge by just importing a lot of the green technology which we sometimes import, and that necessarily does not help value creation within Africa. So that's something which we are extremely proud about. Next, we heard about the National Oil Company of Angola, Sonangol, signing a deal with a German company on production of hydrogen in Angola. So those are major steps. Those are impressive and major steps. In Uganda, for example, we had pre-agreements around the financing of significant infrastructure and a whole host of other deals, which, of course, for confidentiality reasons, I would not be able to say anything about. But we are looking at possibly at the end, there's going to be some reporting from the Chamber, deals beyond $1 billion, which were signed at Africa Energy Week. And we're very proud of that. We're very, very proud of that.
Werner, let's leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for giving us this update on Africa Energy Week, the challenges and successes, and perhaps an optimistic look at the future. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much. Nobody should ever count out Cape Town. Cape Town was a great city, a great host, and we're looking forward to having an even bigger event next year in 2022. So looking forward to talking to you in 2022 and to exploring some of these deals, how far they have moved, in 2022. So we'll see you in Cape Town in 2022 next year. Thank you very much.
See you in Cape Town. Thank you so much indeed. That's Verner Ayukegba, who's Senior Vice President, African Energy Chamber, and he leads the organization's international outreach and public policy initiatives. Verner Ayukegba.